Hi, and welcome to Wilder Outdoor Academy. In today's lesson, I will show you how to start seeds for your garden indoors. Let's get started. So for seed starting, you need a few things. The first is you need to know what you're going to plant. So hopefully you've watched our garden planting video. If you haven't done that yet, check it out. But assuming you know what you want to plant and you know that you need to start it indoors, the first thing you will need are seeds. You can get these at any gardening store. You can buy nicer, even local seeds online, or better yet, go make a friend who does this, who keeps their own seeds, and you can start a seed swap. But the point of the story is you need seeds. Now, what I've got here are cherry tomato seeds. They're actually a variety called Super Sweet 100 Hybrid, but they're basically cherry tomatoes. I grow these because my kids love to go out and snack on them. So this is what I'll be starting today. The next thing you'll need is a seed starting kit. Now, normally you don't need a kit, or I wouldn't tell you to get a kit because it costs money, but these are really cheap. This thing was like $5, and it'll let me start 36 plants, so that's a lot. The reason you want a seed starting kit is because the way that this sits in the plastic container, it facilitates watering better so that your seeds don't dry out, and also so that they start well, they don't start harmed, and that they can grow in sort of like a safe environment at the very beginning. Also, it uses a very specific kind of starting material. This is really light stuff. Whenever you are trying to start something indoors, you want lighter material so that it doesn't become waterlogged and actually rot your seeds or your roots. So seed starter kit, and I need a light. Now this isn't a fancy grow light. This is just an old school fluorescent light that honestly it's so old and so outdated that it probably wouldn't even get bought up at a thrift store, but we had it lying around the house. I've used it. You can buy fancy grow lights. You can buy all sorts of expensive stuff, but I want to show you how you can do this on a super budget. In fact, if you have lights hanging in a counter in your kitchen or in your garage, you can use that. Those work. All you're going to have to do is get a light that you can leave on for around 12 hours a day, and that your plants can get close to, because when you're starting your seeds, you want them really close to those lights. And I will explain why you need to do that in a minute. Okay, so I have opened up my seed starting kit. As you can see, some of these pellets have fallen around or rolled around in here, but it's pretty straightforward. The kit comes with a top, makes kind of a little greenhouse, a bottom, a tray that has spots for receiving and holding these in place, and it comes with seed starting pellets. These are just dehydrated seed starting material. So what I want to do is make sure that my seed starting, I call them pellets, they're just your seed starters, little circles. You've got one in every hole, or every spot in your seed starting kit. Voila. Now what I'm going to do, as the first step, is I'm going to add water to this. I'm going to add enough water so that they actually get pretty big. You'll see them start to expand. And it'll take a few goes. What I have here is my water bottle, my seed tray. And I'll pour some in so you can see. In fact, I'll just kind of start at the top. You can be very, very generous with this, especially at the beginning. You're not going to hurt anything. In fact, these things are dehydrated, so they can suck up a lot of water. And already, they are starting to expand. All right, now I'm going to let these sit for a little bit. And as they dry, not as they dry, as they get wet, I do not want them to dry. I'm going to add more water if it needs more, right? So add it as you go. You don't want to flood the box, but you want your seed starters to start to get big and damp, almost like damp soil. So once your pellets have absorbed all the water and they're, clearly a lot bigger than they were, they're saturated, what you'll do next is take your seeds and open them. I hope that goes without saying. I like to open them with a knife because I never use all of them, and I can save them usually for a year and use them the next year. So that's a plus. But open your seed packet and take a seed. When you're starting indoors, typically I only do one seed per pellet. Although if you're direct seeding, they'll usually tell you to plant several and wean out the bad ones. But here we have the luxury of individual pellets. And so I'll take a single seed, I'll take my pellet, and I'll kind of rough up the top, make sure that the material's loose. And I'll take the seed, set it in there, just gently cover it up with a little bit of that starting material. Not a ton, doesn't need to be deep. Pat it down a little bit, but not too tight because it needs to breathe. Put it in there. And I'll do that for every seed starting pellet in here. Now, once I have done that, it's time to set up my lighting, and that's really important. So with lighting, you really do need an artificial light if you are starting your seeds indoors. And here's why. Is if you place your seeds next to a window or by a light that's not close enough to the seeds, is those tiny, tiny seedlings are going to strive to get up to the light, even if it's just your windowsill. And at first it looks cool because they look kind of big, they're getting real long. But what's happening is that the stems on those seedlings are getting so thin that once it starts to grow more leaves, it can't support its own weight. And they actually collapse and die. And you lose all your seedlings. So whatever light source you use, whether you're using something pre-existing, let's say a kitchen light, or you're setting something up here, you will want your light to be, especially when you're starting them, about 6 inches away from your seedlings. And you're going to keep it at about that height for a while. Now, in this case, I'm not growing in my kitchen. I'm going to set this up to grow just like this. So what I'll do, I'll actually grab a couple of books from my bookshelf. Grab a couple of these bigger books here. And I will set up my light like this. If I want to be real fancy, I'll have a timer. I can set it to turn on and off again every 12 hours. We don't want more than 12 hours of light. Just like humans, plants need cycles of light and dark to grow well. You can also burn them that way. You can burn the plants that way potentially. So just set up my light here. If I don't have a timer, I just do it manually. Turn the lights on for 12 hours, turn them off. It doesn't have to be 12, it could be 8. But somewhere between 8 and 12 hours, you want your light shining directly on your seeds. The other important thing you want to take into consideration is the temperature of your seeds. So especially if you live in a northern climate, most of the plants that we grow for food did not come from here. And so they are set to germinate at temperatures that we don't experience most of the time. So sometimes you'll want to buy a heating pad, especially if you're growing something like peppers or tomatoes that are cultivated heavily in the south. So peppers typically come from south of the border. They only germinate above a certain temperature. I think it's 75 degrees, something along those lines. You can look it up on your seed packets or on your extension website, but you might consider a heating pad. You definitely want to keep them in a warm place, but you'll want to use the cover that was sent to you as well. This will do two things. It'll do a few things. One, it'll keep things moist. It basically creates a greenhouse in here, and it won't let your pellets dry out as fast. The second thing it'll do is it'll keep it warm in here. It'll preserve some heat. So those are both good things. Now, once your seedlings come up and they've sprouted, especially after they have their second set of leaves, you'll find that seedlings have what are kind of like a starter set of leaves. They send up these first set of leaves that will just convert a ton of sunlight into energy. Then they'll set up a second set of leaves that are more like what they'll have when they mature. Once you start getting those, you take this off because this will actually keep them from growing. So again, you will, during this early phase, you'll want to keep your light about 6 inches above. Once your plants are starting to look mature, they've got more than 2 sets of leaves on them, so more than 4 total leaves typically, then you can move your light to be right around 12 inches away, because if you keep them too close, if you keep that light too close, once those plants mature, it'll burn them. It can get too hot and can dry them out, that sort of thing. So once they start to look like plants, they have enough leaves to say, oh, this looks like a tomato plant. Then you take your light, put it about 12 inches up, or drop your plants a little bit further down, and you're good to go. So a couple of last things to let you know when your seed's starting. So again, we will have started and we will know exactly when we're planting or when we are starting compared to when we will have fruit. So if you haven't seen the garden planting video, there's a good bit in there on that. Typically take the number of days here, subtract 30, the number of days to harvest, subtract 30 days, just a good rule of thumb, and start these seeds that number of days before your last frost date. So what we're trying to think of is these plants will only produce fruit after a certain amount of time. So this tomato plant's only going to produce a certain amount of, or will only start producing tomatoes after it has grown for so many days. In this case, it's 70 days. It's over 2 months. That's a long time. In Minnesota, if I direct sowed it into the ground and I waited 70 days, I'd never get tomatoes because it'd be too cold by the time they sprouted. So what you want to do is think, okay, I want fruit or I want food about a month after the last frost date in my area, because if you get frost and you've got seedlings out, it's going to kill them. So take that last frost date, take the time it takes to harvest, subtract 30 days from that, because that'll be the 30 days after your start date or after the last frost that you'll have for those plants to get accustomed to the climate and to the ground and start growing food. Whatever number of days are left over after those 30 days, we back it up, and that's when we start. So for us, it's June 1st. Typically, the last frost is around June 1st. What I have here is 70 days. So if I subtract 30 from 70, I get 40, which is basically, I mean, it's not quite a month and a half, but we'll say a month and a half for ease of math. So that'll take us from June 1st to May 1st, and then another half of the month, which will be mid to late April. I want to be starting these in mid to late April so that I can get tomatoes 1 month after I plant them, ideally sometime in early July. Another thing you want to consider is when your plants have started to sprout and grow, you want to water them by pouring your water into the base of your seed starting tray. You don't want to pour directly on the seed starting material itself because it'll wash it out. The other thing you want to think about is as you get to your planting season, as you get to your planting date, which is very exciting, you're going to want to prep your plants for what it's like to be outside. Otherwise, they will shrivel and die under the sun. So we call it hardening. To harden your seedlings, what you'll do is take a shady spot around your house and just set them in that shady spot for a few hours a day. Just do that for maybe a week. There are a lot of prescriptions around that are like really specific times. I just stick them in the shade for about a week, on and off. I pull them inside at night, put them in the shade during the day. And that will harden your plants. It'll get them used to real sunlight and real weather conditions. So that's it. Get ready to plant, get ready to start some seeds, and get out there and make your own food.